Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like diamonds, talking about the top three types of fishing spots for inshore fishing, specifically redfish, speckled trout, snook, flounder. And I got Wyatt, got Luke. What's up, dudes?
Much
Going on
talk fishing.
Let's talk fishing, talk spots, because everyone wants to know, hey, what types of spots do you like to fish? And it could be really, really intimidating when you go to a new area or even an existing area and you just see how much is out there, right? It looks so small on the map, right? Remember in Dumb and Dumber, it's only a couple inches. But it's so intimidating when you actually get out there. And just so happens that we created a tool called Smart Fishing Spots to help out with that. And we're going to cover the three types of spots. This is what we do in our pre-trip playing. We're literally going to show you what we do and give you a little bit of insight on how to eliminate the dead zones and focus on these three types of structure, types of spots that you can find in literally seconds now with this app, the Smart Fishing Spots app that is free to all Insider members, FYI. And it saves hours. I mean, probably years. I'm being serious. Luke, can you imagine if we had this 20 years ago when we were, getting in inshore fishing? I mean, it would have changed everything. It would have shortened the learning curve by years for serious.
Yeah, especially areas like this. We're going to feature a zone that we fished for many years, and it was very intimidating. It's the 10,000 Islands down near the Everglades. Very intimidating. There's just a ton of options where it's almost overwhelming how many options there are. And the key is just to find the three things that we're going to talk about, especially if they're all together in one zone. That's going to significantly increase the odds of there being a lot of fish. But it's really hard to do without actually going there in person until now. So this is a thing that had we had this years ago, we would have been catching way more fish. And coincidentally, a lot of the best spots that we found are immediately highlighted on this with just like 2 minutes of research, which is really, really cool.
So instead of having to go navigate through 10,000 islands and try to figure out which one's best, this tool does it for you, and it takes 90 or 9,982 of the islands out of the way and gives you the top ones to fish. So what are we going to start with? What's number one of three in no particular order in terms of types of spots?
Well, I think it's situational. In areas like this where there's not a lot of it, I would say oysters. We'll start with oysters. Like oysters is something that is pretty much in all estuaries. It is great at holding bait fish. It's great for protection of the predator fish like redfish, sea trout, snook, flounder. They can get away from dolphin a little bit more easy, and dolphin are less likely to go, to really go up after them aggressively. And this area has a ton of mangroves, and so you usually look for like an oddity type structure, and oysters is the oddity here. So I think oysters would be the one. And why I know you do a ton of oysters up there in Texas as well, right?
Right. Yeah. And in fact, I've been using this tool. We just released it, this past week, and I went to test it, went out yesterday. Oysters were my main target for the day. And there's areas I'd never fished before, areas I'd never seen that there were oysters, pulled them up on the app, literally watched myself, like as I approached it on the little arrow, pulled up, never had fished there before, and immediately started catching fish. Like oysters in seagrass flats are phenomenal, especially if it's like open seagrass flats. Those are kind of broken up islands, but even on just open grass flats, if there's an oyster bar, that's again that oddity that really can seem to attract fish, and it's always a hot spot when I can find a bar on an open flat.
So how do you do it? There's no way this is going to just show up your oyster bar, is it? That's impossible.
Yeah. So what we recently added to the Smart Fishing Spots platform is the oyster reefs from really across all of Florida, and we also have the coastline of Texas, and then we're working on up in the Carolinas as well. We're going to eventually have it all, but it's already available for a lot of us. And so all you have to do is just click on this on the layers. This is just another layer available, and just tap that button.
What?
And now all this white stuff is oysters. Pretty sick. So you can now see it from far out, right? You can see down here, and then just kind of start zooming in and just see where these oyster reefs are, so that you can really just shortcut the spot, right? Like this would take forever to actually go to these areas and see there's oysters there. Pretty stinking awesome.
And even just using the normal, satellite view or Google Earth, the problem with that is there's so much glare, right? And there's so many areas, and we've tried it where we'll take the oyster bar off and then just look at normal satellite map. Some areas you can see it. Some are very well defined, and some there's nothing there. Like it's just a glare, or there's literally not, you would never in a million years know there's an oyster bar unless you actually hit it with your boat or kayak.
Yeah,
So
especially up
game
in
changing.
Yeah, especially up in areas like Jacksonville where the water's real murky and you can't really see under the water very well. But even here in Marco, this water isn't. This is actually a pretty good image of it. But even still, this you can't really tell if it's oysters or sand because this is just sand, but it looks pretty similar to this one. But when we click on it, now we actually know that yes, there are oysters there. Pretty awesome.
I can say for sure, like in areas like Galveston as well, talking about Texas, you cannot even look in that water from the satellite imagery, even on days where it's like clear quotation marks. That water is all muddy, dirty, brown down there. And if you want to pan over, or I can share, you go over to Galveston and look over Galveston Bay. You want to talk about, shoot a little bit further north, Luke.
Yeah, look at
I
this.
was told there's going to be no geography on this podcast.
Yeah, as I'm strolling, you can see these oysters from way up there. This is the 30,000 foot view, if you will, or even higher, and pretty awesome.
Yeah, so even just looking right there in West Bay, like that water is so dirty, and there's all these reefs that you could set drifts over, oyster reefs you could set drifts over. That patch over there.
Look at all those oysters.
Yeah. So you just set a drift, with a south wind, which is what we commonly get here in Texas, start at the south part of that reef, and you can drift over all those oyster bars with, and on the marine chart, I want to say that area is like 3 or 4 feet in depth or something like that. Again, another awesome tool from Smart Fishing Spots. I know exactly how deep that area is and the structure that's there just by using this chart. So I can drift those reefs and catch fish. Like it takes me 10 minutes to know exactly where I need to go. And previously could not read any kind of satellite maps in that area. You're just kind of guessing because that water is so brown. Like if you take that oyster bar filter off, there's no way you'd be able to even know that there's anything there.
That area looks really good too.
Yeah, even if you look at a traditional map, you still don't really know. You can see some depth changes, but you really don't know exactly what's down there. So really, really powerful.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm going to talk about that area for the shaded relief too. Now I want to go fish that spot, looking at it on the shaded relief and the oyster bed chart. It's just, it's opening up areas that I would have never known about. Just being able to see these different layers on top of each other.
Yeah, the cool thing about it,
Redfish Island over there on the left.
The cool thing about this, though, yeah, we'll check that next. But you can actually start just highlighting the perimeter of it, and then you can upload these points into your GPS, and then you'll know that whenever you're inside that circle, that you have the reefs there. So really, really cool. Oops, sorry, I'm going crazy here. So let's get back on out of that. So yeah, this tool has been total game changer for me in Florida. Even though I'm fishing areas with pretty clear water, the ability to see all this stuff so quickly is just amazing.
You trying to get rid of the track? Just hit clear on the.
Yeah. Cancel it.
Nope, clear. There you go. Proceed. So cool. So oysters is the number one. That's something. There's Redfish Island. Those oysters around that sucker.
Mm-hmm. Again, without it, you'd have no idea.
That is nuts.
Pretty cool.
I wonder why they spelled it Redfish 2 words. What's going on over there in Texas?
We've got our own way of doing things.
Oh yeah, that's a proud state. I'll tell you that. Woo-wee.
Florida boys can't be questioning what the Texans are up to.
Oh yeah. I lived in Texas longer than you've lived there, so I understand. I came back prouder than ever, and then all of a sudden my Florida friends were like, "Dude, what's wrong with you? You're not in Texas anymore." Just sell my Texas edition Tahoe. Oh, love it. All right, so oysters. Any other tips on that, guys? Are there particular depths that you like to see? Do you like to fish at incoming, outgoing tide? Do you like the bigger the better? Do you like them near passes and inlets? What are some other oyster tips while we're on them?
I'll say probably the biggest thing to look for with oyster bars, and Luke, I don't know if I can share the screen, but I want to point out something really important when you're picking an oyster bar. The biggest thing is that you need to select one that's like not around a bunch of other giant clusters unless you're setting drifts. So I'll give you guys an example in an area that I was fishing recently, and I'll share my screen here. So if you look, I've got the oyster beds highlighted right now, and there's a couple spread out ones, but again, I said I like the ones that are in the middle of flats. Ideally for your oyster bars, you're going to be set up next to a depth change and next to a bunch of seagrass, but it needs to be an isolated oyster bar. So this bar that's over here where you got a ton of it, it could be difficult to know exactly where the fish are going to be situated on this bar. But if you don't have a lot of time to fish and you want to immediately pull up and start catching fish, I'll even show you guys. This is where I was the other day. It's just this isolated oyster bar that I literally would not have been able to spot. Like you can't really tell just from the imagery that that's an oyster bar, but I know now just by hitting the shaded relief. But it's next to this big kind of depth change right here. So anytime you're close to like a pass, inlet, or like entrance to a flat, you're going to have bait that's coming on and off of the flat. So finding oyster bars that are close to those entrance exit points, there's always going to be activity over there. But finding a big depth change nearby where there's a bunch of seagrass, there's a lot of seagrass on this flat. This bar was holding a ton of fish. Just look for isolated bars that are close to entry exit points on flats. If you're fishing an area that has large flats, if it's creek systems, look towards the entrance of the creeks, creek mouths, things like that. That's all. That's going to be where you find the majority of your fish.
It's good. Yeah. And we've talked before about the importance of having moving water, and you could see that cut. It was a pretty big cut, right? Right next to that oyster bar. And if you're listening, just and you can't see it, imagine that you've got an oyster bar and it looks like a little channel. It's a pretty nice cut. And man, it's perfect. Wyatt likes big cuts and he cannot lie. You other can deny. All right. What's number 2? Luke, pull that map back up. No one wants to see our ugly mugs. Let's get that map going.
Yeah, we'll get back on the map. And so I would say number 2 is, and Wyatt touched on it, is seagrass. So oysters are awesome. Just the fact that they're protection for dolphin and just great habitat for small, small bait fish and shrimp. And seagrass is even better as far as just holding a bunch of life. Seagrass will hold tiny bait fish, shrimp, crabs. And a lot of the predators will seek that, and it's good camouflage for a lot of predators, especially sea trout. So seagrass is awesome. And pleased to report that we also have a similar thing for seagrass on here too. So this is seagrass beds that have been identified, and what I can do is just tap that little seagrass layer, and it'll turn on the grass, and we can see green outlines of the areas where seagrass has been reported. So really cool. And just like before, right? Instead of having to go and actually look visually or try to get on the maps and look. So here you can kind of see that there's grass. A lot of cases there aren't. Again, many cases these maps aren't taken with the best clarity. And so just being able to click a button and see the grass is just so convenient, just to take the guesswork out of it.
And then to maximize structure, right? We talk about that all the time. You've written about it in your Redfish book. Maximize the amount of different types of structure in areas. So oyster bars, seagrass, 2 different types. Just look for areas that have both, right? Yep. And just, man, it just takes so much of the guesswork out of it. It's just such a time saver.
Yeah, and so not coincidentally, this is the area that I caught the most fish when I went there to explore this area a while back. And what I did, how I found it, is I had to actually like go to the low level detail and really analyze these islands. And I noticed that this looked like oysters. So that was a pretty easy sight. This was another easy tell that there's oysters. This one, not so much. I couldn't really tell if it was or wasn't. And again, now that this layer is on, you can literally click a button and see exactly where they are. So again, it's almost like cheating, really. But it's really just amazing how much information is available. And this is stuff that like has been available elsewhere, but it's always like some of it here, some of it over there. Yep. It's never been combined into one package that's easy to use until now. So that's really the unique thing here, where this is all here, just a couple taps of the button, and now you can literally just put both those layers on and just scan around and look for the zones where there's seagrass and oysters in close proximity, and that is going to significantly increase the odds that there's going to be feeding fish nearby. So the odds of there being fish right around this section where there's oysters, seagrass, and mangroves around is just going to be a whole lot better than right here where it's just mangroves. So as Joe mentioned, right, it's maximize the structure. You're going to maximize your results is the phrase. And so this is doing it. This is doing exactly that. And it really does it for you, which is pretty darn awesome.
Yep. And then right here, as Luke said, in the same screen, you can pull up the forecast and you can actually look at what the tides are doing up to 14 days out. And you can see what the wind's going to be doing. I mean, everything is right here. So it takes pre-trip planning like to a whole new level on your fishing trips. I mean, such a time saver. And then, if for Wyatt, obviously there's, grass in other places besides just Florida. We're working on this, for other states as well. And as Luke said, even the oysters, it's all Florida, all Texas so far. Working on the Carolinas next, and Georgia, and just going to continue to keep building out on this stuff. And we're still not even into the V2, the version 2, if you will. I mean, that's the exciting part. This is all still kind of this beta test mode, and in version 1, we have some really, really cool stuff coming next.
Yep. And so let's go to the third thing we mentioned.
No, hey, Wyatt hasn't even had a chance to talk about. Wyatt loves grass.
Well, I was just going to say, we talk about the 90-10 zone a lot, and I would have to agree with you. If you can find grass, and I actually said this earlier, if you can find an oyster bar that's next to seagrass, you're going to be in good shape. We talk about 90-10 zones. I can almost guarantee, because I know you guys have fished this area a lot, your best 90-10 areas are those zones where there was grass and oysters, and the third thing we're going to talk about in close proximity. But I like when I can find an oyster bar that's on the point of a grass flat, because then I can kind of drift the grass flat, see what the fish are doing. A lot of times what will happen is if it's, shallow grass, if it's an open flat, the fish start there early in the morning. And then as soon as, it gets a little bit hotter, again, we are in summer, that sun gets up, I find the fish dropping off to the edge, and usually they'll be working around that oyster bar. But it looks like most of the bars around this area are on the points of the island. So I'm guessing that y'all probably had your action early in the morning, top water around those points.
Yeah, well, I didn't find this until later. I wasn't sure if it was oysters. So had I had this map, I would have been here when it was topwater time. So we had our action with paddle tails and some jerk baits. So caught some trout with the jerk baits, and then caught some snook with paddle tails up here.
Yeah, no, it's so cool because another big thing that I hear this from insiders all the time is like, we're trained on being able to spot oyster bars. Like even earlier when you were pointing them out, it's tough for some folks that are just getting into fishing to be able to look at a gray patch and say, is this shell, is this oyster, is this sand? But now to have a defined source of this is definitely an oyster bar because the state has marked it as an oyster bar, it's really cool to have that, and grass patches for sure, because I still get mixed up sometimes looking at bottom content, if it's really sandy or muddy, is that grass? Is that just silt? Is it, mud? Even, looking further down, there's some areas that might be depth changes and it might be grass. You just really can't tell unless it's a really, really shallow flat. But to have these very defined areas where this is seagrass, there are seagrass roots here, and you can expect that there's going to be grass. It's just nice to know you have areas to fall back on if you were wrong in your pre-planning. And again, if you use this in your pre-planning, you really shouldn't be, because these are literally defined sources. But I see this as something that's going to help a lot of people who haven't looked at satellite maps for a really long time, or don't trust their ability to do so, because now it's literally a highlighted piece of area that they can just go and expect to find. If we say the trend is on oyster bars, which for me it's been recently, then people can just pull up that filter and look for oyster bars in their area. It's a very easy formula to follow. So I've already started showing this to some people, and people have been telling me that they're finding fish a lot faster now, just being able to tag the areas that, if they want to go fish grass or oysters, it's helping people get on fish a lot faster, just from my observations.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember, speaking of grass, I remember when we hired Wyatt, or it was during the interview process, and we always make all employees take a drug test. And Wyatt's like, guys, I pass on grass, except seagrass. Hi, give me some more, give me some more. And yeah, Wyatt did pass the drug test. That's how we hired him. So why is it, what a horrible name, Dismal Key? Is it that bad fishing? Very dismal?
I don't know.
looks like there's a bunch of oyster bars at the entrance. People might be losing some lower units.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe people get lost in there. Look at all those different paths in there. Again, the old-fashioned way, you have to go in there manually, and there's so many just cut-offs in here. This looks pretty gnarly.
It is dismal.
It's got some good oysters around it. I bet you there's some fish around it.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
So
All right, now moving on to number 3. We gave
now we're ready.
Wyatt, the grass master, some time to talk about grass.
Yeah, so number 3, and again we've touched on it too, but it's really just depth changes, right? Fish do like to have some deeper water to escape to. If there's a huge temperature change, like in the summertime, the deeper water is a little bit cooler. In the wintertime, the deeper water is a little bit warmer. It's just less prone to get impacted from the outside air. Obviously, if there's like a big storm coming in, a lot of churn, they don't want to be up in the shallows. They'll just kind of shift off, and so they prefer to be in areas close to some deeper water. So if you can find areas that have the oysters and grass and some deep water nearby, that's going to, again, just increase the odds of there being fish.
Well, how would you find that? There's no way there's a tool that does that too.
Oh, yes, there is.
No way.
And so obviously you have the map here, the satellite map, but it's really tough to see deep in most areas. Here you can kind of get an idea, but what will just guarantee what the depth is use this marine chart. So with this it's another layer, and you can turn that layer on, and then you can see the actual channel and where it goes. And so again, a great thing to look for is a point with seagrass and near a channel, and this just helps you highlight and just more quickly identify the deeper channels that have structure next to it.
So I pretend like someone's listening to and tell them numbers. So like this one area we've been studying that has oyster bars and grass. It's around 2 feet. It's pretty shallow around it. All of a sudden it goes from 2 to 7 or 8 feet in this little cut.
Yep.
Right. I mean, there's probably a ledge there because it looks like it goes somewhat sharply anytime you have those little contour lines. I mean, that's a pretty big shift going from 2 to 8 feet in a really, really short span.
Yeah, and so that guarantees that there's a lot of good current flow going through there, because this current is what really digs these troughs out. And so you can see this is the bottom contour chart called the marine chart on Smart Fishing Ties, and you can basically see the current and how it flows out. And so it just goes straight down through this deep zone, and just again, ideally you can find some good structure like grass or oysters that pushes up close to that channel, and that's just going to be the zone that's most likely going to have the most fish.
Is it 22 feet up there right where it says Dismal Key?
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah, that's an intersection. So again, it's a low
water moving through there.
Yeah, intersection with the contour point. There isn't any seagrass or oysters near it though, so it's not quite as appealing, but it's still worth a shot. I would actually prefer to go fish this island right here. You can see all that grass around it, and it has that deep water there as well. So pretty cool. But again, just so much better information than just purely looking at the regular Google, what we use for like 15 plus years, right? Yes, this is very helpful, but it's not nearly as helpful as having these extra layers to really help out and just dial in exactly where the high probability spots are. That's what they're not always going to be perfect, but when you target these type of spots and make it a habit of doing so, the odds are going to be in your favor. It's really simple as that, compared to other anglers who just don't have access to this type of information.
Yep. And this marine chart, which is the sonar, is one way to do it. Wyatt, I know you like the shaded relief. I assume you're using the 3D kind of mapping for finding little ledges and drop offs.
Right. So I like to wade, and one of my favorite spots to wade is kind of like I just talked about entry exit points. What I like to do is find those shorelines that are right outside of like a large marsh, or they're outside of a large flat. And I want to show one instance where Smart Fishing Spots like really helped me out in finding a really good redfish hole that I know I would not have found it without the shaded relief. So this area over here is notorious for really dirty water, and there's a bunch of little entrance points, but it's kind of tough to know where the main kind of current flow is for this area. So I was wading over here not too long ago, and by using the shaded relief map, I was actually able to see where the main channel was actually dumping out, because all these little exit points over here, if I zoom out a little bit more, you will be able to see it Looks like I'm having some internet issues here.
Oh boy, the guy who lost power yesterday.
Yeah, that's me.
Just do a hard refresh, cold reboot, dude.
Cold reboot. Let's do it.
That's what our IT guy used to say. Cold reboot.
Cold reboot. Yeah, so all these areas, it's tough to know like where the current actually comes out of. So using shaded relief, I can actually see like where the hard channels are. And I actually got right outside of this channel right over here. I'll pull it off. And I walked this shoreline, and I can't tell you how many redfish I caught. Just, it was like cast after cast after cast after cast on an outgoing tide. But there's so many different little channels over here that it looks like it empties out, but there's no water, there's no current flow. And we know that predators are going to sit in areas where the bait's actually being pulled out. So if I go stand outside of an entry point where it looks like there might be water coming out, but it's just, it's shallow for really far back, there's no actual flow of bait, it's not a constant conveyor belt of food, then I'm not going to catch a bunch of fish. But using this shaded relief, I actually got right outside of this channel, weighted this edge, and you can see like where stuff drops off. So I know I can't wade out over where it's a little bit lighter, but kind of the harder pack stuff that's closer to these shorelines, I can wade. I can see that there's, secondary points out here in areas where I have no idea that there's even, that this is even wadeable.
That's
Looking
so
at it
cool.
on the 3D imagery, I can wade this. I've caught trout on these points. This has opened up a ton of new areas for me to go wade and go check out, just because there's all these cool just features that I can click on and know, okay, there's oyster bars. That's probably why I've caught some trout over here. There's oysters. And I can go through so many different zones that I've never been able to actually see. It's just been, okay, I'll go over here and I'll try it. It looks like, all these entrance points look good. And I've gone and hit several that I've not had a lot of success at, but I remember which ones I have had success. And it's the ones that are the main points. Understanding that through this 3D imagery just helps me connect the dots a little bit more, and pick new spots if I do want to go visit them and try and apply those same trends. I know one of these other cuts right up here I've had success at too, but you can see where the hard channels are coming out of these areas. So definitely use that shaded relief as well. It's also really helpful in just understanding the topography of your flat. So knowing where the entry exit points are, you've got some good channels over here. There's an exit channel over here. Looking at this view over here, it's not immediately as clear. You'd really have to get down here and study all the different points and areas, but you can see a little bit better when you put that 3D imagery up. Okay, there's some entry cuts here, cuts over here. There's an old cut, looks like it was for that they had railways that ran through here, but all these little areas that you just have a better view of using the 3D imagery. Most of my scouting is now done in this view. That way I can see the depth changes, and I just understand the topography of the flat a little bit better and how fish are going to move around depending on different tides or different weather trends. If I see them hanging closer to edges, I'm going to look near those depth changes. If they're up in the shallows on seagrass or oysters, I can use that 3D imagery and overlay those oyster bars and all those grass flats, and I can just find fish a lot faster.
Game changer. And I've seen some comments from some of our members who have gotten in here and played around with it, and they said, hey, I can't see every single small area. Know it's being updated like every minute now, with more and more of this 3D vision, if you will, this underwater topography. It is being updated, and really by, I would say, the next 30 days, it will be 100% complete in every single area you can imagine in the country. And we're just going to continue to keep building on top of it. So just want to throw that out there, because I know that question's come up a few times. And if you're still here wondering how the heck do you get your hands on this, and this is just a fraction of what this tool called Smart Fishing Spots does. Once again, it's free to Insider members. And I saw someone ask, well, hey, what happens after a year? It's still free. It's free forever. As long as you're an active Insider member, it is yours. It's just one of the many tools that we give our members to help you go out there and maximize your time to find the best fishing spots super fast, and to save you money, which is time. And obviously we got all the tackle savings and all kinds of cool stuff. But this was so important to us because we know no matter how much awesome tackle you have, right? Wyatt, you can have the nicest custom rod in the world, and you can have all the nicest rods and reels. But if you can't go out there and confidently and quickly find good fishing spots, it's going to be a struggle, and it can be really frustrating. And we know from personal experience. And so we're always just trying to think of ways to give you tools, especially if you're a beginner. And that, that's the toughest part of the whole learning curve is when you're first getting started, or if you're transitioning, right? I mean, I think for the most part, most of our coaches and a lot of our members were bass anglers and really wanted to start getting good at inshore saltwater fishing. That's a big transition. And we just want to cut that learning curve, the brutal learning curve, out and help you find fish fast. So once again, it's free, made it a complete no-brainer. You'd have to pay thousands of dollars to go get all of this stuff individually. And I'm not being sarcastic. I mean, some of this 3D underwater, especially once you get near shore and offshore, it's thousands of dollars to buy this. And we're going to be creating some new ways for you to export it into your unit as well. You can already do it, but we're going to give you even more creative ways to do that and just make it easier for you. So pretty pumped. And one other thing too, for the beginner side of things, we came up with a beginner's guide to inshore fishing, doing what I mentioned earlier, just kind of cutting out all the fluff and saying, here's exactly what you need. Here's what, in terms of tackle, here's what to focus on. Don't get overwhelmed by all this stuff. Don't go to a tackle store and buy one of everything. You're wasting your money. We said, here's exactly what you need. Here's what to avoid. And obviously, once you're in the club, we just give you more and more tips on how to go find the feeding fish fast. So we'll put a link on how to get that beginner's guide as well. Luke, anything else on this? Any other cool tips and tactics on finding spots, feeding zones?
I would just say, just look for those 3 items. And obviously not every area has all 3. So some areas doesn't have grass, some areas doesn't have oysters. So at least find 2 of them. And the more types of structure you find in one spot, the more fish you're likely going to catch there. And just use tools like this just to make it easier. It'll save so much time.
Oh yeah.
So much hassle just to go out there and just know where it is before you get out on the water. Makes fishing more fun and definitely more catching than fishing.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would say, don't rule out all of the structure that you're seeing kind of close to the ramps or close to shore. I was telling somebody about this the other day, how I'd marked oyster bars that were less than 2 minutes from the ramp, and can't tell you all the guys that were sitting in the circle that I was talking to was, I pass that area all the time. And it's like, I just caught a bunch of redfish over there. So don't count out areas. If you can see structure there and it's got those 3 best kind of inshore spots to go to, don't rule it out. And any structure that you can find can hold fish, and especially the ones that don't get pressured as much, they're going to have much more willing fish on them as well.
Yep. Yeah, it's crazy. Boat ramps, especially if there's like cleaning tables, that attracts a lot of different types of species, from obviously catfish and some bottom feeders to some predator fish. And it was hilarious. I was with Peter Deeks, and we had kept a couple of keeper cobia to take back, and we're cleaning them. And this boat comes in, and they see us, and like a little bit jealous, that is for layperson. And they're like, oh man, it was horrible. We didn't catch anything. This young dude comes out, young as in like, I'm gonna guess like 15 or so, and on foot, and he walks by us, and he's fishing like right near the cleaning table at this boat ramp. And these old guys are still out there complaining about how bad the day was. And like on his 3rd cast, he catches a keeper flounder like in their face. And these guys are now even more ticked off. This young kid just, kept a flounder and probably took it home and ate it that night. And I was like, that is so awesome. And so I love the fact you said that, because so many people, you feel like you got to get these fancy boats, and it is nice to have all that. But you don't have to have a boat. I mean, heck, a lot of our members don't have boats, or even kayaks, fishing from land. And I know, Wyatt, you do a ton of wading there in Texas, and we have a lot of people like Wader Dave. I mean, Wader Dave had a boat and ended up selling his $80,000 boat, and he goes wade fishing 200 plus days a year and absolutely crushes it. So you don't have to have all that fancy stuff. You do need some fancy technology to help you find the spots, but you don't have to have all that other stuff. And don't feel like if you do have that fancy stuff, don't feel like you have to just leave and bolt and go 15 miles away the second you hit the water. There's a lot of good spots around a lot of good boat launches. So just throwing that out there.
Yep. And I'll add too, a lot of people just have trouble catching slams. And so the good thing about that, the trifecta that we just talked about, where it's seagrass, oysters, and deep zones, that those types of spots will hold redfish, sea trout, snook, flounder. Really holds a little bit of everything. So it's a great type of spot to target, and you'll significantly increase your odds of getting slams compared to like going back in the back of a bay where it's all real shallow, you're probably more likely to catch redfish and less likely to get trout. But when you have those oysters and the grass and deep water, you can catch a little bit of everything, including tarpon, cobia, all sorts of fun. And so that's why another reason why I like fishing those types of spots. More fish and more quantities of species as well.
That's good. Cool, gentlemen. Well, this has been hopefully a helpful one for you. I know this is the kind of stuff I was just dying to have when I was in that transition mode. It helps eliminate all these dead zones and lets you focus on areas that work. And so once again, join us in the Insider Club if you haven't. And if you're on the fence, get the beginner's guide or just join today, risk-free for a year, and get the beginner's guide and the smart fishing spots and all the other amazing tools that we give you as a member. We'll put links to everything down below. If you have questions, let us know down below as well. The blog, or which is really our website, saltwater.com, and the fishing tips section. If you're not already there watching it, that's the best place to leave questions. Sometimes on YouTube, it gets lost in all the clutter of YouTube, but on our blog, it comes to us and we will personally be able to read it and answer your questions, your burning questions. So comment down below, and otherwise we will see you guys on the next episode. Otherwise, well, I just said otherwise we be out. Any other otherwises?
Real smooth.
Real smooth, X-Lax. All right, guys. Peace. We out. Woo, woo.
See ya.